What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Thoughts with Nick. As you can see, switched up the setting again this week, got the river flowing behind me and quite a bit of snow. And there's also a heron on the shoreline behind me. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see him. It'd probably be right over my right shoulder. If I can see him when I watch this back, I'll put a little note in the description. But anyway, today's quote comes from yours truly, and what I have to say is, as we get older, it's crucial to remove sports from the position of priority and authority. And what I mean by this is, growing up, when we play sports, like, I'm going to be speaking using myself as an example, but sports really dominate time and scheduling for families, and that's just the norm. It's inescapable. But as we get older, that no longer has to be the case. When we're no longer on a sports team, sports don't have to rule our lives anymore. And yet I find that a lot of times they still continue to do so. And it kind of inhibits personal growth, I think. And that's what I want to talk about today, is just the duality of sports and how at a young age they're extremely beneficial to personal development. But like I just mentioned, as we get older, it kind of starts to work the other way and hurt personal development, I believe. So just to kind of detail why I think sports are so important at a young age, there's a few key values, personal values, that I think can be developed really well through sports, and it's hard to get them elsewhere. One place, just to mention it, that I think you can also get them at a young age is music. Music also gives you something to strive for. Like, I was in band as well, and it really gave me something to strive for and improve at outside of sports. But aside from those two things, it's kind of hard to really develop some of these attributes that I'm going to talk about while you're young. So first of all is cooperation and trust. So through playing sports, you have to rely on your teammates. You have to trust them, and that team setting, you can't do everything by yourself. You have to count on other people to do their respective job and know that they're going to, achieve what it is that they need to do to ensure that you guys win. And as far as trust goes, it also escalates up to the level of the coach. You have to trust the coach and believe that they're going to make the best decisions and call the right plays to ensure that you end up winning the game. And those two things, especially at a young age, I feel like kids, it's really easy to be selfish when you're a kid and only think about yourself. So, those virtues when you're young, it's kind of really not the norm. So those are really big to develop, I think, at a young age. And going along with the cooperation and relying on others, this is kind of adjacent to that, I guess you could say. But sports are a great way to meet people when you're a kid too. Great way to form social bonds and connections as a child, because you're already united for a common purpose. You're in the same place, you're doing the same thing, so it's only natural to create friends from that. I have friends still today from youth sports, and it's cool. You maintain that bond over the years. But anyway, back to some of the virtues. A couple more that I think are really easily developed throughout youth sports are hard work and endurance. And specifically, what I mean by hard work is perseverance to work hard. Like, with me, for example, there was a lot of times when I was a kid where I thought I was done. I thought I was physically exhausted, and it was really mental exhaustion. I kind of gave up on myself before I hit my physical peak or physical limit, and I was ready to just throw in the towel. But the coaches motivated me and pushed me to keep going past the point that I thought was, the end of the road for me. And it showed me, wow, there's so much more that I'm able to achieve if I don't limit myself. And I think that's true for a lot of people, and it's really inspirational on a personal level to know that there's more to be achieved. Like, you can't put a limit on yourself. And that's what I mean by hard work and perseverance, of pushing through the perceived obstacles that are in front of you. And sometimes without the coaches or those authority figures, so to speak, to really give you that boost to get over the top, you wouldn't end up doing it, because at a young age, you haven't experienced a ton of adversity yet, most likely. So when you hit that point where you're mentally tapped out, you think that's it. And if no one tells you any different, then that really is it. And as far as discipline goes, same kind of thing. You know, it really, I felt that coaches really enforce discipline and keeping you on track, whether it's showing up to practice on time, whether it's making sure you execute the right plays, all those types of things. And with football, if you don't do it right, you're going to end up getting punished, have to run laps, you know, whatever. And I think this is a good example of kind of like a low stakes environment where you learn the consequences of not doing things the right way, of not being disciplined. It's not like the real world, where if you don't do things the right way, you might lose your job, or if you don't pay rent, you're going to lose your house, you know. No, you're just running laps, and yeah, it sucks and it feels pretty brutal in the moment, but like at the end of the day, it's not really the end of the world. And just to kind of combine the two, discipline and perseverance, speaking from my own personal example with football, I wasn't really that good. I was okay, you know. I wasn't a standout player, and I stuck with it. I worked hard and persevered, and I rode the bench until my junior year, or until my senior year rather. But then my senior year, just right place, right time kind of situation, I ended up starting every game on varsity, and we were a really good team. And it was just like an awesome feeling to know that like I could have quit and I would have been justified in quitting because it seemed like there was no opportunity for me, nowhere for me to fit in. But I didn't. I stuck it out, and when the time came and my name was called, because I had worked hard, persevered, was diligent about knowing what I had to do, I didn't fold. I didn't, you know, crumble under pressure. I was able to rise to the occasion, and I didn't lose my job the whole year. I stayed, you know, I stayed solid. And even looking back on it, that still is like something that gives me a sense of pride and accomplishment of knowing, like, you know, where other people quit, or other people that I saw in years past had the same opportunity as me and they got replaced because they couldn't get the job done. But I was able to stick it out because of, you know, those values that I feel like were ingrained in me from the years and years of sports. And kind of like the capstone, the final piece of importance, important values, important learning that I feel like comes from youth sports is winning and losing, right? So the value of winning, obviously that kind of goes without saying, but it's kind of twofold, I think, because it's the patience and payoff of all this time that you spent working, practicing, and grinding in the dark with your team to finally get that win on a Friday night, or, you know, whenever it is that your team plays. Football is always Fridays. And then, you know, finally to have that come to light in front of everyone and realize all the time that you spent in actually built to something and it paid off. But at the same time, it's a very fleeting feeling. You can't dwell on the win, because just like that, you have to get prepared and ready for the next week, for the next opponent. The very next day after we won or lost, we would be watching film at 8 a.m. the next morning. And, you know, celebrate the win tonight, but next week, the next day rather, it starts all over. That's not the exact quote, but that's something that the coaches would tell us. And I feel like that translates really well into the real world of just like, celebrate your wins, right? But only temporarily. Don't go around living in the clouds and being so high and mighty, proud of yourself because you did something well. No, you got to kind of humble yourself and get ready for whatever's coming next. Take what you can from what went well, but don't just keep singing your own praises because you were able to get the job done. And the other side of that coin is losing and dealing with losing. And a lot of times sports shows that when you lose, it's recoverable. You can bounce back, you know, you can live to fight another day. And it's not the end all be all. It's not the end of the road, but at the same time, sometimes it is. And this is another example of the duality within sports. You know, it shows how it shows you how to bounce back, but it also shows you how to deal with those opportunities that you can't bounce back from. Like when my team got eliminated from the playoffs, that was brutal. I actually got injured that game, and it just like it sucked all around. It was kind of heartbreaking, not gonna lie. And another opportunity or example of my own failure was with basketball. Like I love basketball so much more than football. Love to play it, love to watch it, and I thought I was really good. I still think I'm pretty good, but I tried out. 7th grade, I got cut. 8th grade, I got cut. 9th grade, I got cut. So I had to cut my losses. I had to say, all right, I think I'm good, but evidently I'm not quite as good as I thought. And I had to humble myself a little bit, and it just kind of teaches you humility and how to deal with like embarrassment and things like that, because getting cut, I still had to go into school the next day and have classes with the people that made the team, and it's like, damn, we both know that they made it and I didn't. And similar to other things that I've said, like that embarrassing feeling, it's literally all in your head. Like chances are the other person is not thinking about that at all. If anything, they might feel a little bad for you. They're not thinking like, damn, that guy, he sucks. They're not thinking that. But it just shows you how to deal with your own shortcomings, and like that it is okay. And that was kind of like a tough pill to swallow for me, but it was an important lesson to learn, and it was an important lesson to learn of when to stop and when enough is enough, and that like you don't have what it takes sometimes. I hate to say it, but that's what I learned. So those are some of the benefits, and the really important benefits that I think come with playing sports at a young age. So now, in the second half of the video, I want to talk about some of the downsides of too much influence that sports has as we get older. So when you're younger, sports occupy a ton of your time. Like for me, the travel and everything like that and practice commitments was major on my schedule, my family schedule, and everything like that. And when I graduated high school, that was no more the case. It was I no longer had this commitment and obligation. A major part of my life was gone in terms of my schedule and what I was used to doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's true for a lot of people after high school, unless you play college sports, and then taking that a step further after college, it becomes true. And I think it's really easy when that happens to kind of transition from spending that time playing sports to spending that time watching sports. You transition from a more active engagement to a more passive engagement, from a player to a spectator. And since you already allotted that time to playing the sport, it's not really clear that you're like kind of wasting your time just sitting around watching sports, because that's time that you didn't have available before. So now you do, and it kind of makes sense seemingly to use it in that way because it's such an ingrained tendency. And I think it's really easy to kind of fall into that trap where next thing you know, all your free time is occupied by watching sports. Like sticking with myself, for example, I found myself watching football like all day on Sundays during and after college, and watching basketball games a lot of nights, and during the football season watching Monday night and Thursday night football. And this year I'm really proud of myself because I was able to get away from that and kind of do things that I feel like are more productive for me and for my goals. Like I spend a lot more time reading now and working on stuff for my channel, and just things that are actually contributing to something and building towards something. And just like speaking on football, you work 5 days a week, you 2 days off, and one of them I was spending fully occupied watching football. I don't find that to be productive. Looking back on it, I feel like that was wasted time where I could have been doing more and achieving more. And you live and you learn. It's not like I necessarily regret it, but there could have been better uses of my time for sure. And I feel like there's a lot of people that's probably a relatable statement for. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching sports, because I still watch sports. I'm still a sports fan. I've gone to a couple, there's a plane going over the top, you can probably hear it. I've gone to 2 NBA games this year. I still watch games from time to time if it's a game that I want to see. But it's not a major part of my schedule. Whereas in the past, I would make sure I was home to see a game. I would make sure I, didn't have any commitments so that I could watch a game. And I feel like that, again, I feel like that's true for a lot of people. And that limits what you're able to do with your free time. It keeps you tied to your house, tied to your TV. You can't be out and about. You can't be more like free to do what you please, all because you're keeping sports in that position of authority and priority, which it no longer needs to be, because it's not an obligation and a necessity anymore, because you're not on a team. Like, you're a fan of a team, and that's okay, but it's important to remember that that's a one-way street. You can know everything about the team and the players on the team, but they're never going to know who you are. I mean, 99% of the time, they're never going to know who you are. It's a one-way street. So it's really important to kind of like, I guess, keep that in perspective and make sure that you don't end up giving an undue amount of your attention and time to these sports teams, because they're not really giving anything back to you. And I think it's important to kind of reframe that, because like I said, when it's such a part of your life, it's so ingrained as a youth growing up and spending all this time playing sports, it becomes kind of like a vestige of your past to continue to give so much time to sports, and you don't even realize you're doing it. And I think it's important to leave that behind and realize what's going on and know that it's okay to do other things, and it's actually more beneficial to do other things with your time. It's more productive. So kind of like a final couple points that I want to touch on before I wrap this one up is just like the emotional variability and emotional relationship I see people have with sports. And I've been using it a lot in this video, and I think it's a great example for this too, because football teams play once a week, and I see so many people where if their team loses, their week is ruined, a whole week in the gutter basically, just because something happened that they had zero control over. The outcome, they had no impact or effect. It had really nothing to do with them, but now their week is ruined. And I think that's just a shame that their emotional state is so closely tied to something that is really totally outside of their jurisdiction. And I feel a little bad for those people, because it doesn't need to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. And I feel like that's kind of like childlike. Once again, no judgment on my end. It's just, actually, that's just what I think. I feel like it's kind of childlike to have your emotional state tied to a game. That's really what it is. And building on that, I feel like these games, sports, I'm calling them games, that's what they are, end up becoming an obsession and attribute of people's personality. Like, you become known as the fan of blank, of whatever the team is. And you're so much more than that. You shouldn't allow your personality to be defined by such a narrow thing, and it shouldn't dictate every single conversation, and it shouldn't occupy so much space mentally. And like I said, in terms of the childlike mentality, I feel like that keeps people trapped in almost like a childlike state where you're not able to develop and into more mature areas mentally. Like, you're still focused and obsessed on a game rather than things that actually impact your life and your personal growth. And I feel like that's, once again, it's just kind of like a shame, because it doesn't contribute to actual progression. Like, watching sports all the time, it doesn't build to anything. There's no payoff at the end like there was when you played sports and you won the game. It doesn't actually affect you. You might feel good when your team wins, but really, you're not getting the championship ring. You're not going down in the history books. So it's not really doing anything for you. And, again, there's nothing wrong with feeling that sense of happiness and pride. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone. I just want to kind of reframe the priorities and just kind of like speak on it and show that just because this is the way that something has always been in your life doesn't mean that it's necessarily right or the way that it needs to continue to be. It's hard to get away from those ingrained habits, especially when it's something that was like so monumental within youth. You know, those habits of childhood, they die hard because they're just, it's all you know, right? So it's a final point before I wrap it up. I know I said that already, but I think something that is really, really problematic, probably the most problematic, is when these people, serious sports fans or failed sports players, when they have kids and then they live vicariously through their kids in the youth sports. And we all know these people. You don't want to be this person, and I'm sure these people probably don't realize it in the moment, which is the shame of it. You know, they make life hell for their kids just by screaming at them and just, you know, pushing them harder and harder and harder to do the things that they never could do in their lives and achieve what they couldn't and be the star player. And it just sucks to see, like I said, it's really hard on the kid, and it kind of creates a poor dynamic between the parents and children. And it's not good to put that kind of pressure on kids. It fucks them up, I think. And you don't want to be that parent that's like, I know it's not intentional, but you don't want to be the parent that's damaging your kid mentally and making them hate a sport that should be something that's an outlet for enjoyment and physical activity, not some major stressor on their life. So that's really all I have to say today. And just as a parting message, what I'll leave you with is, if you can, try to take a few minutes to evaluate your relationship with sports and how much time you spend watching it, how much time you spend paying attention to it. Like I said, I still pay attention to it at times, but I've really, you know, down-regulated it from a place where it used to really dictate and dominate my schedule in a way that it really didn't need to at all, and that I gained nothing from. I actually, you know, lost things from, because I wasn't able to use my time wisely. And yeah, just try and take a look at your own life and see if it's really kind of like benefiting you in terms of the usage of your time. And also try and see why, like, get to the heart of your relationship with sports and determine why it is that you spend so much time watching sports. Is it because of the things that I was talking about? Because that's just all that you know and all that you're used to doing from being a kid? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I think it's really important to kind of examine the things that we occupy our time with and determine, are they really benefiting us? And sports is one of them, you know. So I'll leave you with this. And I think this is going to be the title for the video. It's a duality of sports. As a kid, it's very, very beneficial to be involved with them and participate in them, because they teach you and help you build intrinsic values that carry with you through life. And it's hard to gain those values elsewhere at a young age. But as you get older, it's important to evaluate and redefine that relationship and make sure that it's really working out for you. That's all, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day.